Hello, DCU fans! Today's going to be my breakdown and review of Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 1. We'll be talking timeline, Easter eggs, and so much more. Now, there will be spoilers, but as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget, we have an August contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out in case you're interested. Plus, hang around to the end of the video, and we'll talk about the Doomsday Countdown rewatch on the Discord. Alright, so we have lots of topics to cover in the video, and the first will be timeline indicators. So this is the DCU timeline that I've come up with so far. You can check out my earlier Peacemaker video if you want to know more details, but as you can see, it's kind of a waterfall leading us down to Peacemaker Season 2. And speaking of, there's two things we've been told about where this fits in the timeline. It is a couple years after Season 1 and about a month after Superman. So let's see if the episode confirmed any of this. So, first of all, James Gunn did tell us that it's been a couple years on the show since the events of the finale, but he's keeping the timeline vague on purpose. I see how difficult, after all my time at Marvel, it is to make things truly fit together, so it's an unspecified amount of a couple years. Well, this episode at least did not give us any indication about the timeline relationship between Season 1 and Season 2, but maybe later in the season we'll get more. On the other hand, we did learn a lot about Season 2's timing in relation to Superman. So earlier, when asked if Peacemaker Season 2 takes place about a month after the events of Superman, Gunn said it does, yeah. And in fact, the episode shows that perfectly. So remember, the episode starts when it's very cold outside and Peacemaker's telling Eagly, no, we're not going outside for a fly, right? It's literally snowing outside. Instead, they go into the quantum unfolding storage area, and that's just going to have to do. Fly if you want to fly, Eagly. It's too cold outside. And later, we find out this is happening in January because Argus is getting a hit on their computers anytime Chris goes into that pocket dimension. They talk about the Christopher Smith thing, and they're calling it a glitch. So then we jump 6 months later, which presumably would put us in July, 6 months after January, but I'm pretty sure we're in June because Harcourt's mail is a cornucopia of timeline indicators. So here we get a date telling us, we're at least May, if not June, because her bills, of course, are past due. And then we get another date here that officially confirms we're in 2025. I mean, if you think about the Superman movie, they never actually gave us the year. But now we know we're in 2025, and here again, we see 2025, so that's nice. And then this date's kind of funny. It's a Postal Service date that seems to be 2020? I mean, I don't even know where they would find a prop with a 2020 date on it, so I'm just going to ignore this. Instead, I'm going to say that we are in June of 2025. And then we get confirmation this season is happening after the Superman movie, because they say that the glitch is similar to what we picked up this summer in Metropolis, and they refer to that as the Luthor incident. Of course, they're talking about Lex Luthor and his pocket dimension, and he himself explains that he replicated the Big Bang using the Luthor Core Mega Collider, tearing a tiny hole between two universal fabrics. So yeah, they are officially tying Luthor's pocket dimension to Chris's quantum unfolding storage area, so that's really cool. Plus, we know the Superman movie was in May of 2025, so again, this places us after that movie. And then we have Rick Flag Sr. saying, and let's move this case to Argus Priority 1, because the last thing we need is another dimensional rift tearing up this planet. So yeah, they are very serious about figuring out what is going on with all these pocket dimensions. So yeah, I think this timeline is working out really well so far, but let me know your feedback, and hopefully, before the season is over, we'll learn how Season 2 relates to Season 1 from a timeline perspective. Alright, so now let's talk about the DCU canonicity updates. Lots of good information here. So remember, in an interview recently, James Gunn was asked, a lot of people are wondering what's canon in the new DCU, and he jokingly responded, it's whatever we mention in anything. But then he got specific about Peacemaker. He said, Peacemaker is easy. Season 1 is basically canon outside of the appearance of the Justice League at the end, which you'll see something about that in Peacemaker Season 2. And oh boy, did we. This was so cool, right? So first of all, they say previously in the DCU. That was neat. And then they show that they've changed the lines, tweaked the lines a bit. So back in Peacemaker Season 1, they actually asked if you could call in the Justice Gang. And then this is interesting. James Gunn revealed that this was a deleted scene filmed for Peacemaker Season 1, but Warner Brothers didn't want them talking about Green Lantern. So Peacemaker says, one time I puked all over Green Lantern. I got seasick from flying on a green magic carpet. And then he says, the weird thing is, I think he liked it. So, yeah, really funny. But again, this should have been in Season 1, but Warner Brothers nixed it. And then they show us how the scene with the Justice League has instead been changed to now have the Justice Gang. And I admit I was a little surprised to see Superman hanging out with them, but I was very surprised to see Supergirl there. Because remember, this is happening about 2 years before the Superman movie. This is from Peacemaker Season 1. And we saw in the Superman movie, Supergirl didn't really seem like a team player. But who knows, maybe she thought it'd be cool to show up because, it was about aliens, the butterflies. So, all right, I'll accept that. And then also it's important to keep in mind Metamorpho wasn't there because he hadn't joined yet. It was at the end of the Superman movie that Guy Gardner was like, oh, hey, we need you on the team if you like the Justice Gang name. And then we see them paying off that Green Lantern puking joke because Hawkgirl says, what a meathead. And Green Lantern says, yeah, screw that guy. He tells people I'm a puke freak. So I love the fact that they took a deleted scene from Season 1 and tied it into this retcon scene that they're saying now actually happened in Season 1. Very, very clever. And then speaking of canonicity, James Gunn hosted a podcast that was a Season 1 rewatch, and he talked about what was canon and what wasn't from that season. Of course, obviously we know the Justice League cameo, that's not canon. But interestingly, he said it's unlikely that Aquaman is as famous a hero as Superman during Peacemaker Season 2. And the real ramification of this is, during Peacemaker Season 1, that means those fish jokes about Aquaman are not canon. In fact, we don't even know what Aquaman's status in the DCU is at this point. And then when he was asked about Wonder Woman and the Flash, he said the same thing. Whether they exist now, I don't know. And then in the final episode of the podcast, he was asked if Green Arrow is canon, and he said, I don't know. So definitely he's keeping himself open on these major characters as to what their status is in the DCU. Okay, so how about some of the lesser-known characters that were referenced in Season 1? Well, James Gunn said, I'll accept Matter Eater Lad. So, yep, that reference is canon. He also said Dollman's reference is canon. And of course, the previously on made Kite Man's reference canon. But James Gunn would not put up with Batmite. He said that is probably not canon. It might be a little too ridiculous, but he did go on to say there's a possibility he becomes canon. And then I just thought this was fun. He actually said episode 7 of the first season, every single thing in this episode is canon. And he went on to conclude it might be the first episode we can say that about. So anyway, the podcasts are a lot of fun, both for Season 1 and now he's doing them for Season 2. So for that matter, how about the famous Bloodsport scene? Remember, in the Suicide Squad, they mentioned he's in prison for putting Superman in the ICU with a kryptonite bullet. Well, James Gunn was asked, did it really happen? And his response was simple. No, nothing matters until we say it. So, okay, we just have to wait and see whether that reference is still canon. And then I thought this was interesting. We just got information about the crypto shorts. Are those DCU canon? Now, I'll admit I was a little skeptical while watching them because I can't imagine Clark would bring crypto to Metropolis. And then we had scenes which were funny, but hard to imagine being canon, such as when crypto accidentally sliced the Daily Planet globe in half. Well, James Gunn has officially confirmed. Someone asked, hey, James Gunn, one question. Are the crypto shorts canonical in the DCU? And he said no. I love them, though. So I guess we can call these Elseworlds. I really appreciate that James Gunn keeps giving us these updates. I hope that continues. All right, so now let's talk more about the Justice Gang. So obviously Peacemaker goes to try to audition with them, and we get this fun Easter egg, Crank Toys. Of course, that's been mentioned both in the animated series and in the video games. And then as he goes in for the audition, we get another fun Easter egg when the White Rabbit walks out. And then lastly, I guess this might be an Easter egg, perhaps tying back to the Butterfly villain, of course, from Season 1. But then he finally sits down for his interview, and Maxwell Lord confirms a lot of assumptions we had. So he says, welcome, Peacemaker. I'm Maxwell Lord. My company, Lord Tech, finances the Justice Gang. So that was kind of the assumption from the Superman movie, but nice to get it confirmed that he's financing the group and that, yes, they are calling themselves officially the Justice Gang. Then we also learn that 2 of the founding members are Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl. So that's cool. And then I thought this was interesting. They talk about the fact that Peacemaker murders people. Write that down. And then Maxwell Lord has the audacity to say, Peacemaker, we at the Justice Gang try to avoid casualties. Metahumans like the ones in our organization are becoming more and more distrusted, and we can't afford to stoke the fires. Okay, so does that mean Maxwell Lord does or does not see the irony in this situation? Remember, in the Superman movie, we have Hawkgirl flying out of the building with the leader of Baravia, taking him over the city and basically dropping him down to his death. So either Maxwell Lord isn't aware she did this, or he does know about it and he's trying to move past it and clean up their image. I think this is really, really going to come back to haunt the Justice Gang and Hawkgirl in particular. All right, so now let's talk about Sphere and Cleavis Thornwaite. All right, so I'll admit, I did not catch the fact that this dude's name is Cleavis Thornwaite. What a name. I mean, it was probably in the credits to the Superman movie. I just didn't see it. But he's definitely in the credits to Peacemaker, listed as Cleavis. All right, so he works for Sphere News, and he's talking about some important stuff here. He says there has to be a solution. This is the third, keep in mind, third metahuman escape from Belle Reve or Arkham in the past 2 months. What on earth? I want to know who these three people are, right? Now, one of them might actually be Lex Luthor, because remember, at the end of the Superman movie, we learned that he was sent to Belle Reve. So did he already escape? I mean, that would be crazy, right? But there's also some other interesting things we learned. So the news ticker said this is just the latest black eye for Argus. So not a good time to be the leader of Argus for Rick Flag Sr. And then we see that metahumans force urgent response and reflection. As metahuman containment systems fail, aka Belle Reve and Arkham, experts debate the ethical and practical implications of how society should respond to superpowered individuals. And this just cracks me up. I mean, do they not remember that it was Lex Luthor, a human, mind you, who's the one that caused all the problems in Metropolis? So obviously we're getting a big human versus metahuman issue arising in the DCU. Going to be really interesting to see where this goes from here. All right, so you might remember that we did see Cleavis in the Superman movie. That's him over there on the right, notice with Sphere News. And of course, he was interviewing Lex Luthor and interviewing Peacemaker. That was one of my favorite parts of the Superman movie. People went nuts during that scene. Absolutely love it. All right, so now let's talk about what is going on with Argus. This is fascinating to me. So let's start with the fact that we learned that Harcourt has 18 years of experience working in the intelligent field. And she even says at the CIA, at the NSA, and at Argus. But we now learn that Amanda Waller is going after Harcourt. So first of all, Amanda Waller is facing congressional hearings, so that's put her in trouble. And of course, that's because of being outed at the end of Peacemaker Season 1. But we see that Waller must still have some power, because not only is she blackbooking Harcourt so that she can't get a job, she also did the same to her daughter. Man, she is vengeful. It's also worth noting that after the counselor accuses Harcourt of having toxic masculinity, she then shows off a display of masculine toxicity when she kicks the butt of these bikers. Oh my goodness, what an amazing scene. She looked so good in that fight. But what's so fascinating to me about the whole Argus situation is how differently things went down in the DCEU. Remember, in the Black Adam movie, Waller was still in charge and Harcourt made an appearance. And then in Shazam 2, we saw both Harcourt and Economos make an appearance. However, in the DCU, we see that there's leadership changes slowly happening at Argus. In Creature Commandos, Harcourt is out. We don't even see her. Waller's still in charge, but now Flag is in. And then by Superman, Waller's out and Flag is in charge. And in fact, in Peacemaker Season 2, they confirm that. Argus has been monitoring Peacemaker ever since Rick Flag Sr. was named director. So the interesting situation that arises from this is, now Rick Flag Sr. has access to confidential information that would let him know that Peacemaker actually killed his son and that Waller basically authorized it. Oh my. In fact, Economos verifies that he's wasting taxpayer money having him, Peacemaker, surveilled 24/7 in the hopes that he screws up. Wow. So this situation will probably result in even Economos getting ousted from Argus, meaning every single person that used to work there has been booted. That's crazy, right? Crazy. All right, so look at a summary of these two different paths for Argus. Of course, the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker Season 1 were basically in both the DCEU and the DCU. But over in the DCEU, we saw Waller and Harcourt continuing to show up in Black Adam and Shazam 2. But over in the DCU, we now see by Creature Commandos, Harcourt is out. Then by Superman, Waller is out. And in fact, by Peacemaker Season 2, I'm betting Economos is out. That is so wild. All right, so let's close things down by talking about all the crazy antics in the quantum unfolding storage area. So first of all, you never know who you're going to run into, right? Because Peacemaker keeps seeing this weird-looking alien who's disposing of this rat-like creature in an incinerator. I mean, what is going on, right? So the closing credits call him a kyphotic alien. And kyphosis is basically a spinal condition where your spine curves outwards more than it should. And I mean, the dude does kind of seem to hunch over a bit, but I think this is just a random name they're giving him, and we'll find out more about him as the season goes along, because he's even in the opening credits. So the dude must have some type of important role. So we'll have to wait and see. But more importantly, Peacemaker enters a very special door, which looks like basically a what if episode, right? What if Peacemaker hadn't killed his brother and his dad wasn't a total jerk. In fact, we see the three of them teaming up together as superheroes. We see them taking down the rainbow creature, which of course is a deep cut reference to a cheesy villain from the Batman era way back in the day. We also see them taking down the Ultra Humanite, and he's another deep cut reference from the Justice League. So very cool. But most importantly, we see that his dad and his brother are alive. And just the way John Cena played these emotional scenes was incredible. Just really powerful. And I love the fact that imps get brought up again. So they're talking about the fact they're from the Munchkin dimension, which is basically 8 doors down, so you can reach it from this quantum unfolding storage area. But remember, they talked about dimensional imps in the Superman movie. So what is going on with these imps? So I'm personally offended for poor Batmite. I mean, all these other imps are considered canon, but he's too ridiculous? Okay, hashtag justice for Batmite, right? Too funny. Anyway, there's a lot of big differences in this reality. For example, the musical jokes like pour some honey on me instead of pour some sugar on me. But clearly, the most important difference in this reality is Peacemaker is dating Harcourt. Or rather, he used to be, but he called it off, actually. And now she's with, well, they refer to him as a jarhead. Well, a jarhead is normally somebody in the military, you know, the army. Wouldn't that be crazy if it was actually Rick Flag Jr. that was dating her? So in this reality, Peacemaker didn't kill him. Instead, he is a rival for Harcourt's affection. Oh my word, the possibilities. Well, anyway, this reality's Peacemaker soon ends up confronting the DCU Peacemaker, and notice this fun little subtle difference. This reality's Peacemaker symbol points up, while the DCU symbol points down. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, after a violent fight between the two of them, our Peacemaker accidentally kills this reality's Peacemaker, opening up a very interesting situation where now he might be able to take over the life of that reality's Peacemaker. Crazy, right? Some very wild stuff is ahead of us. In fact, let me know your thoughts. Did you like this first episode, and do you like how it's setting up the storyline for the entire season? I love it. So let me know your thoughts. You know I love to read and respond to everything. Also, don't forget, we have that August contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steelbook. And there's the membership option in case you're interested in that. And I always love to mention the Discord. Here we are in the Peacemaker Season 2 spoiler section, and I love Miss Shuri's meme. When your 10-year-old brother wants to watch Peacemaker Season 2 Episode 1 with you, and then this quote from Madam Web is perfect. No, this is not a good idea. Too funny. And then I also promised I would talk about the Doomsday Countdown rewatch. Every day listed here, we'll watch a different movie or show as we prepare for the December 18th, 2026 release of Doomsday. So we have 2,300 members across the globe, conversations 24/7, and I'll leave a pinned comment so you can join. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we will all eagerly await the next episode of Peacemaker.